Pencil Kings, 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 Pencil Kings.
Okay, we are back. This is the Pencil Kings podcast, and today we are talking with Jeff Maxuda. Did I say that right, Jeff?
Yes, you did.
Awesome. Well, that's a good start. So one of the things that we're doing, we haven't talked a ton about what's happening inside Pencil Kings on the podcast, but I want to create some resources that are good for our community, as well as it's interesting, I feel like, for the people who are listening and maybe not inside the community or thinking about joining and not sure if it would be right for them. So what we've been setting up is the idea of these houses. So that inside the community, there's different things that people are interested in, and we've broken it down in 3 different sections. So Jeff is the current leader of the animation house, so they're going to be focusing on animation related stuff and doing it 1 month at a time. And we'll explain exactly what this means and get into Jeff's story. But I guess that sets the stage. Is there anything that you want to add before we kind of dive into the nitty gritty?
No, actually, unless we're going to start talking about, like, I guess what we're going to do in the animation house, or is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I guess to start, Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what's the 1-minute overview? Who is Jeff Maxuda?
So basically, I started doing art about, I'd say like 9, 10 years ago, and it was kind of a bit later on in my life. I'm 31 now, and I kind of started when I was around 22, 23-ish, 21, somewhere around there. I kind of forget. It's a little blurry, but and then when I went to college, I met my professor who inspired me a lot. He was really into comics. His name is Mark Basile, and he really got me into drawing. And I started doing a lot of hand-drawn stuff, traditional stuff, and I really got into it. And it kind of picked up from there. And really a lot of also graphic design stuff, digital stuff, using things like the Adobe Suite, Illustrator, Photoshop. But then I came across a website later on called Newgrounds, and I got inspired by a lot of different artists there. Like, some people might know Ego Raptor, Jazza. I'm trying to think of some other names off the top of my head. But yeah,
did Jazza come out of there? Like YouTube Jazza?
Yeah, YouTube Jazza, Draw with Jazza. Right?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's that's actually the first place I saw him there is at Newgrounds, and he had I think his first cartoon was Larry. What I saw first from him, so it was a big inspiration. But when I saw those guys, I really wanted to do stuff like that, and so I took a class in Flash. Actually, before I took a class in Flash, I tried to learn it on my own, and it was just very, very overwhelming. But once I started actually like taking a class and understanding things, I got really into the animation aspect, and I really picked up from there. I started doing a bunch of little animations, and that's pretty much I do a lot of illustration stuff in Flash. That's like my go-to program. And now what I do is I actually teach Flash and digital art, other stuff like Photoshop and Illustrator at a high school, a special education high school in Whippany. So, yeah.
Very cool. And so to go back to when you got started, this professor in university, were you in an art program then, or was it somebody outside of art that kind of pulled you aside and said, hey, I think you would be really good at this. You should try this.
Well, actually, originally I started college and I was like, oh, I'll do web design. I can work at home. It's that kind of thing. That was my mentality back then. And, then I kind of got pulled into the computer graphics part of it. And, with Mark, with the drawing stuff too. And then, then I went in that direction.
Very cool. And I just wanted to clarify for anybody listening that Newgrounds, so it's an old site, and what they focus on is Flash games and I guess Flash animation.
Yeah.
I've met a few of those guys, and if you're familiar with some of the video games, they created a video game company called The Behemoth, and Dan Paladin, who is the artist behind some of those games, he was one of my favorites. And whenever I would go to a game developer conference or something, he was one of the guys that I always sought out rather, to go so I could buy him a beer. And he's like internet famous, and yeah,
Oh,
very cool.
so you actually got to hang out with him, or?
Yeah, Tom and Dan,
Oh, that's
here and
awesome.
there while I was in that sort of mode. It's a long time ago now, but yeah. Very cool. But Jeff is in charge of our animation house. So I thought it would be really cool to talk about some of the things that he has planned coming up. And we're just getting started with this idea of houses. So there's going to be some chaos, like anything new that we do it's never really set in stone. We just try and I don't know if the word fail forward is the right way to say it. But basically, I feel like you can try and get everything perfect, but so many projects just end up not being finished when they have this. So I'm more a fan of try your best, try to do your best, try not to confuse people, but just get some momentum, move things forward, push things forward a little bit. And so we're right at the point where we're starting to launch these houses and we're getting the final, how to apply stuff done. And so what are people going to be doing inside house animation?
So actually, the first project that we have lined up is going to be an animatic. So basically, like a moving storyboard. And the group is actually going to choose. I had a choice between doing a script or taking a song and applying some visuals to it and making it an animatic. So that's the first thing I had in mind for our first project. Then we'll probably move on to doing some reference videos of animation. And then I know later on I kind of want to have something like a bigger project that we can work on with where we create our own story and have a little bit larger animation, maybe something that's 1 to 2 minutes long, because
Ooh.
which would be really fun to do. But I'm trying to remember what I did for this next month. It'll come back to me. But yeah, that's like the gist of what's going down pretty much. So.
Okay, so for somebody who's listening and they're not sure what an animatic is, what is that?
Okay, so basically it's like if you saw like a storyboard, like with, I'm sure everyone's familiar with storyboards, like just like a sequential kind of representation of a story, which sounds repetitive, I'm sorry, but
No, I always tell people that a storyboard is like a comic book because I feel like everyone has seen comic books. It's not illustrated to the point of comic books. It's much quicker, but it's kind of the same idea where you have panels and there's action happening inside these panels. And in a film, it would go from, somebody would write the script and then an artist would draw out the storyboard and then comes the animatic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like, yeah, you would have the animatic, and actually in the process of animation, usually what they do is they usually have the script first, then they have the audio that they record, then they start doing the storyboards, the animatic, and then they start going on to the animation. So that's like kind of like the overall process. So yeah, so hopefully that animatic will be a really fun project to do.
And is the animatic all hand drawn? Like I know where I started or I had my break was doing previs, which is all 3D animation, but it's very, very rough animation. And what you guys are doing is different, correct?
Um, well, actually, I was actually going to ask the group how they are going to be making their animations, or how they've would plan to make their animations, and what they would work in, because most likely I'll be working in Flash, but I don't know if everyone has access to Flash. So if they wanted to do hand-drawn stuff, I would definitely encourage that, if they didn't have access. But yeah, so I think they should have the option of going that way.
And which software is out there for people who don't have Flash? I was looking into this a little bit recently and I didn't find a clear winner. It really depended on the kind of animation that you were doing. That probably the best one that I found that's free was Blender. That you can use Blender as kind of, and I'm not even sure what the style of I would say it's like Flash. But what else is out there that you've seen that people are using these days?
That's actually a good question. I've heard of Blender. Actually, have you used Blender before or no?
Nope. I know it's a free 3D package. People do amazing things with it. I think there may even have been a full featured movie done with Blender.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
But you can use it. It has a compositing thing. So, and for those who are listening who don't know what compositing are, that's when you take all of your 2D images and kind of put them together in layers and stuff and make everything look awesome. I don't know a simpler way to explain it than that. But what you can do is take, like, let's say you have an arm. You could take the upper arm and that's one piece, and you could have the lower arm, that's another piece in your hand, and then you can have all the fingers and you can kind of link them together so that when you rotate the upper arm, everything else moves just like you would expect it would. So it's kind of like this marionette animation. I'm sure there's a proper word for it. And I've done it before, but
Oh, like kind of like, have you ever seen the bone tool in Flash? It's like it's like connecting like joints together and like kind of moving everything. Is that what you're
hmm.
kind of?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I haven't seen that tool, but I mean that's how when I was doing Flash animation a long time ago, that's what we did. There's no bone tool yet, but yeah,
yeah.
exactly that.
Cool, cool. So yeah, back to your question, about if there's any free, applications or programs. I actually don't know any, which is pretty bad, but because like the ones that come to my head when I think about animation is, obviously Flash, which is now actually called Adobe Animate, and Toon Boom Harmony is another big one.
hmm
And I know some people animate also in After Effects, but yeah, actually, I don't know any past those.
Well, I know you can do you can do very basic animation in Photoshop, and
Actually, yeah, that's
there
true.
are some tools out there,
Yeah.
but I'm sure we'll figure out, and I'm sure that people inside the house will know as well. And I think this is part of what we're trying to do with bringing everyone together is that I wanted people to have relevant conversations. So if you want to draw comic books, I don't really want to listen to what you're talking about if I'm into animation. It's cool and I'm interested, but my focus is animation. I want to know more about this stuff. I want to know about the problems of animation, and how you're solving them, and what kind of software you're using, and how you had a breakthrough with what you're trying to do. So, okay, so we go from the animatic, then we're doing some other things. What do you think are some of the exercises, or because I feel like animation is one of those things that for a lot of people they have stars in their eyes and they just say, oh, I would just want to work at Disney.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole like ton of work that has to be done to learn so many different things and to study life, and there's so much nuance in it. And so where do you think for newbies who have this idea of like, oh, well, I want to work at Disney, I'm interested in animation, I joined Pencil Kings, where do you think they're going to start? Because I feel like there'll be a lot of people who are starting really from nothing. How are we going to get these people up to speed? What can we do to help these people?
I guess my advice would be like to just, draw a lot. I mean, that's the usual mantra, right, of practicing art. Drawing a lot, really tackling anatomy and poses and flow and things like that. But also, you got to think about if someone is making an animation by themselves, they are really taking on a lot of different things, such as, they're making up the characters, they're animating the characters, they're drawing the backgrounds, they're making the story. Whereas, a big place like Disney, they have a bunch of different people actually doing those different jobs. So you have a background artist, you have someone who's doing the rough animation, then you have the in-betweeners, then you have the cleanup guys, so it's kind of good to think about it that way. Whereas there's a big team versus, trying to work alone and improving alone, or you don't have to improve alone. You can improve with people, but when you're working, just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the things that really tripped me up was always having this vision in my head that was so much bigger than what could realistically be produced. I mean, there are people who do amazing amounts of work, but they're not your average person, I would say. And so it's good to to kind of compartmentalize these things down and say like, oh, okay, well, I'm learning animation, so maybe I'm just going to focus on the face, people talking or something, quite simple, and that's enough. Like even that is a great place to start.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I know, yeah, because you mentioned like people that do like some crazy amounts of work and they just like pump it out, like Happy Harry, he came to my mind. I don't know if you're familiar with that artist, but it's another Newgrounds guy. And he just does some really very cool things, very awesome work, So, but I mean, when I sit down to make an animation, it actually takes me a really long time. Like I'm a slowpoke, so. And I do spend a lot of like sometimes I'll spend like 8 hours, like in one shot, just go, and then but it's still like have so much to do, So
So just to give somebody an idea, Jeff, for you in 8 hours, what would you expect of yourself? Like, what would be a good result after an 8 hour session?
that's a good question. If I was to sit down, it depends where I was in like the animation process, but if I was to sit down and, I try to get some, like, let's just say I was starting from the beginning, right? And I had my script done, I had the sound done, right? And I was starting to draw things out. I try to make sure that I get all my shots down and in this 8 hour period. And at least start some like rough animation for at least, a few of those shots and just really get it down and like really sloppy, nothing like crazy cleanup because you don't want to get into that mentality of where everything has to be perfect right at the get-go. You really need to like lay stuff down and see how it looks. So that's what I would do in those like first like 8 hours. Just lay things down as fast as I can, see how it looks, see how the sloppy motion looks.
And so, like, let's say you're drawing a character. Recently, I was looking at a bunch of demo reels of, I think I typed in like animation demo, or I typed in traditional animation demo reel just to see what some people had done. And there was this one person, and they had two characters that they were animating, and they really simplified things down to the point where it's like the upper torso was a box, and then I don't think it was cylinders, but it was like tapered boxes for the upper and lower arm, and just like boxes for hands. And then they just did the animation with this. It was all hand drawn. Nothing was 3D, or it didn't have any kind of IK bones or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just hand drawn. And what I thought was, wow, this is such a great system, because with the colors that he'd use, you can very easily differentiate between these two characters, no matter if the camera changes or anything like that. And it's done very quickly, but it's not super sloppy, so you can see very clearly where all the arms are. And then I guess the next step would be to just make sure that things are looking good, and then do a final pass on that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like start cleaning things up and making it look a little clearer, and trying to communicate it really well, clear, and everything's cleaned up. So yeah, definitely.
All right, let's talk about some of the books that you've come across that are really helpful. I know that there's I believe it's the Animator Survival Kit.
Oh,
Richard
Williams?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's
I'm not going to pull it up right now, but that's one of the ones I think like everybody always recommends. For me, with the CG stuff or the 3D stuff that I was doing, and Stop Staring was one. And I'm not sure if that applies so much though to the hand-drawn animation. What are some of the other ones that you've seen? Especially, what I'm really interested in is not these really thick, dense theory books, but more of the smaller, action-oriented books, where somebody can pick it up and maybe they don't learn a ton, but they learn enough to get them past that point of where they can start to create something themselves and see it move and be like, oh wow, okay, I understand so much more in just having done this very beginner step. And the reason why I really like books like this is that there was a series called Visual Quick Start Guides, or Visual Quick Start, and this is where I learned to make websites. And it wasn't the most in-depth book. It was very, very simple. There was like one concept per page, but it was amazing, because then I could see the possibilities and take it wherever I wanted. So as a beginner, that was such an amazing book. I've never heard anyone recommend that book for learning that kind of thing, but I'm wondering if there's books like that you've come across for animation.
That's a good question. Do you mean like traditionally or digitally, or it doesn't matter? Or
I think it doesn't matter. It's more of just thinking of that person who's really at the beginning stages. They know they want to do animation, but that might be all that they know. And because I feel like there's something with getting that person from the beginner level to putting in some work where they can start to see the results of their work, and then have that aha moment where they're like, oh, I start to get it. And for me, that was when I would draw a lot and it was pretty bad. And then an art teacher said, hey, your drawing is pretty bad. You should learn proportions. Here, let me show you a few things about how to draw the face. And here's a really simple book on body proportions that you can use. And then I had that aha where I thought my drawings were good. Somebody came along and said, not so good. Use this system. And then I started to realize how it's not just all action. You got to have a little bit of learning, then a lot of action, a little bit more learning, a lot of action, and it's kind of this back and forth process. So for animation, have you come across anything like that?
as far as animation goes, the Richard Williams book is a really good book. It is very thick. There is a thinner book, Preston Blair. It's an older animation book. That one's pretty good. But I think the one that pops into my head as far as like, doing a little bit of action, reading a bit, doing a little action, that kind of thing. I felt like I did that with, I think it's called How to Cheat in Flash. I think that's something. It was something along those lines. How to Cheat in Flash.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember the author's name, but That was definitely a good book for me. Preston Blair was pretty good too. But yeah, I'd say that the How to Cheat in Flash book was good, a good book.
Cool. And for you, Jeff, where did you have your aha moment with animation, where things started to click and I feel like with a lot of things you're learning it and you're not really sure, but then things are like, yeah, they click and you're off to the races. And it's usually happens right at the beginning. You don't need a ton to get to this clicking point, but there is a point.
Probably when I was actually in class, working on one of these projects, and it was like I'm trying to remember the project. Oh, it was like a 4th of July e-card or something like that, but I turned it into like this like 30-second animation of like really nonsensical. I kind of went overboard, but that's kind of like where things started really clicking with like things I was using like tweening and stuff like that, and different things. But actually, I mean, even today, there's certain things that I do where I'm like, oh, like that's how you do that, or like, oh, like I gotta stop doing it this way and do it this way, so I feel like those moments like still come a lot. But yeah, actually, you know what? I feel like when you're doing any kind of artwork, really, and you have like those really frustrating moments, like I feel like that's actually a really good thing because once you work through that frustration, I feel like that's when the aha moments come.
Yeah, maybe there isn't one. Now I'm thinking back and doing 3D. That's the area where I went the deepest, and I don't know where I would say the aha moment is. I do know with drawing, though, in proportions, it's like, bang, just slap me in the face. And it's like, okay, you just leveled up very clearly.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a leveling up kind of moment.
All right. Well, I think we've got time for one more question here about the animation house. What do you think the personality, one of the things we talked about was having these houses having their own personality. And you might not have the answer, but we can still discuss. What do you think the personality of the animation house is as compared to the comic house or the illustration house? How's animation going to be different? Because you guys have got I think, the hardest job. Animation is just way more work than the other things, and way more study that's involved, because it's kind of like combining illustration and comic books and taking it to the next level.
Yeah, that's true.
So what's the personality of these hardworking animators going to be like?
I guess we'll see like when when the group comes together, because I'm sure it'll have like a group personality. But I feel like it's going to be very, very goofy and fun, because I mean that's the way I really approach things. But we'll see how the group environment comes together. I think that should be really fun, really interesting to see that. But I'm looking forward to that.
That put a smile on my face, because I remember trying to do animation and how frustrated it was when I was a kid, trying to be perfect on the first go and make every frame, very hard line work and draw it right the first time. And I think I was about 10 years old, and just being really frustrating. And if I could go back and see that, 10-year-old version of myself and just be like, hey, light line work, very fun, no detail, just enjoy this, be goofy, be ridiculous, and just have fun exploring. I think that would have been great advice for myself back then.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it. Well, I really appreciate you stepping up into the leadership role and guiding these animators for the next half a year about, and looking forward to see what you guys do in house animation. And of course, we're always here to support you guys. So if you ever need help, we're here for you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week on the Pencil Kings podcast, where we'll talk to another one of the house leaders.
Thank you. Take care.
Scope demands patience, skill, years of practice.
Ah, you talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.